right, so we're chapter 4, right?
Yep.
Okay. Chapter 4 of the best or worst best school year ever. Chapter 4, the janitor, Mr. Sprague, said that no more trash masher. He told the principal that he could have a trash masher or we could have the Herdmans, but we couldn't have both under one roof. I can't stand around and guard the thing all day, he said. There's 6 of them and only 1 of me. And every time I leave the basement to go sweep the floor, they shove something into it. They'd already mashed up the 4th grade ant farm and a plastic dinosaur exhibit, and then Leroy went ahead and mashed up the Good School Citizen Award too. Once he found out that he couldn't eat it or spend it or sell it to anybody. Alice reported this to her mother, and Mrs. Wendelken was so disgusted about the whole thing that she resigned from the PTA, which my father said was good news for the PTA. Of course, Mrs. Wendelken didn't come right out and say, I quit because I'm mad at everybody. She just said it wasn't fair for her to run the PTA talent show because Alice was in it. She said Mother could do that because Mother didn't have any talented children in it. Does that mean we aren't talented or just that we aren't in it? Charlie asked me. And I said both. Actually, nobody had any talented children in it, and they really had to scratch around to get kids to do anything. So, it was no night of 1,000 stars, which was what all the posters said. Night of 1,000 stars, an evening of family entertainment, PTA talent show. When my father saw the list of acts, he said he hoped there would be more talent in the refreshments than there was going to be in the show. There aren't any refreshments, Mother told him. This is just an evening of family entertainment. He shook his head. Not unless you have refreshments. It won't be. I guess Mother took another look at the list because the night she called around for people to make cookies and brownies and cupcakes and punch. And the next day the poster said Night of 1,000 Stars, an evening of family entertainment, PTA talent show with delicious refreshments crowded in at the bottom. This was a big mistake because refreshments is one long word that all the Herdmans understand. And right away you knew that they'd figure some way to get them. They can't, Alice said. They'd have to be in the show, and they can't do anything talented. They can steal, Charlie said. Alice looked at him the way my mother looks at the bottom of a hamster cage. That's not a talent, she said. Maybe not, but the Herdmans did it better than anybody else. Still, it was hard to see how they would do it for an audience, or what they would call it on a program, or what they would steal because there wasn't much left that they hadn't already stolen. Last year, they were all absent on October 4th, and we had Arbor Day because for the last 3 years, the Herdmans stole the tree. And the principal said at least this year we'd finally get it planted, even if it died over the winter. Maybe they've got some talent we don't know about, I said. And sure enough, 3 days later, Gladys Herdman took a pair of kindergarten safety scissors and cut Eugene Preston's hair in the shape of a dog. It could have been a cat, though, or a horse, or a pig. Something with 4 legs and a tail, anyway. Or else something with 5 legs and no tail. You'd had to look right down at the top of his head to see it. But this was what you mostly saw of Eugene anyway, because he was the shortest kid in 2nd grade, or 1st grade, or even kindergarten. So naturally, he got picked on a lot. And if you had to choose which kid in the Woodrow Wilson School would get his hair cut in the shape of a dog for no reason, you would choose Eugene. Of course, he was already a nervous wreck from being the shortest kid around, and you knew it wasn't going to calm him down to have people holler, "Here, Fido!" or "Here, Spot!" at him. And if his hair was anything like the rest of him, so would probably be the way for years. So things didn't look good for Eugene. "A dog?" my father said when he heard about it. "I can't believe it looks like a dog." "Who says it looks like a dog?" "The art teacher," Charlie said. "I heard her tell the principal. She said if it wasn't on Eugene's head, she would display it as an example of a living sculpture." "Why don't you tell that Eugene?" Mother said. "It might make him feel better to know he's a living sculpture." "I don't think so. For one thing, nobody knew what a living sculpture was. I helped Eugene look it up in the encyclopedia, but he looked under living instead of sculpture and never got past living sacrifice, which was all about torture, and that sure didn't make Eugene feel better." "Come on, Eugene," I said, "don't be crazy. No one's going to make you be a sacrifice." "Ha," he said. "How about Gladys Herdman?" He was really worried. And between being worried and short and having his hair all chopped up, Eugene began to twitch and wiggle and bite his fingernails and bang himself on the head. "I can't help it," he said. "It makes me feel better." Actually, there wasn't a kid in Woodrow Wilson School who didn't wiggle or twitch or tie knots in his hair or something. Boomer Malone once ate a whole pencil without even knowing it till he got to the eraser and broke off a tooth. Some kids banged their heads too when they didn't have anything else to do. And of course, the Herdmans banged other kids on the head, but nobody did it as hard as Eugene. This was fascinating to Gladys Herdman. She quit hitting him and hollering at him and just followed him around everywhere, waiting for him to knock himself out, we all thought. "Why do you do that all the time?" she asked. But Eugene was scared to tell her the truth. He figured if he said it makes me feel better, she would pound him black and blue and claim it was a good deed. My mother thought Eugene ought to enter the talent show. It would take his mind off of his trouble, she said, and there must be something he can do. Matthew, every day we go through this. If I don't have a mask on, should you be this close to me? I couldn't imagine what, except maybe stand on the stage and be short, and I never heard of a show where part of the entertainment was somebody being short. So I was pretty surprised, along with everybody else, to learn that Eugene had a hidden talent that he could perform at the talent show. And then sit in them the right way. And then on TV, probably, Gladys Herdman said, Gladys was the one who discovered this talent, but she wouldn't tell anybody what it was, and she wouldn't let Eugene tell anybody either, not even his mother. So Mrs. Preston didn't know whether to get him a costume or a guitar or elevator shoes or what. My mother didn't know what to put on the stage for him to use. "Maybe he needs a microphone," she said. "Maybe he needs some special music. I'd really like to know, because I want Eugene to be a success." It would be wonderful, she told us, if Eugene could win first prize at the talent show. What she really meant was it would be wonderful if anybody besides Alice Wendelkin would win first prize for a change. But I knew that wouldn't happen unless Alice broke both her arms and couldn't play the piano. I guess Charlie thought it was worth a try, though, because she asked Eugene what he needed for his talent act. "He needs walnuts," Charlie reported, "but he says he'll bring his own. He doesn't want to. He's scared to be in the talent show, but he's more scared of Gladys. What's he going to do with walnuts? Mother asked. I don't know, unless maybe he's going to juggle them. Charlie brightened up. That would be good. Even if he dropped some, that would be good. It seemed to me that if Eugene could juggle anything, we would all know about it. But maybe not. My friend Betty Lou Sampson is double jointed and can fold herself into a pretzel. But she won't do it in front of people because of being shy. It could be the same way with Eugene, I thought. I also thought he might back out. But on the night of the talent show, there he was. So for once, he had something different to look forward to. There isn't usually anything different or surprising about the talent show. One year, a girl named Bernice Potts signed up to do an animal act, and the animal turned out to be a goldfish, which was different. But then the act turned out to be Beatrice talking to the fish, and the fish talking back, and Bernice telling the audience that the fish said, Charlie loved this, but he was in the first grade. Then he believed anything anybody told him. Mrs. Wendelken said this act didn't belong in the talent show. It didn't have anything to do with human talent, even if the fish could talk, she said. That would just mean the fish was talented, not Bernice. Mrs. Wendelken didn't think Eugene should be juggling walnuts either, according to Alice. If he can do it, Alice sniffed, which he probably can't. Eugene didn't even try. He came out on the stage carrying a big bowl of walnuts while Mother was introducing him. Our next talent performer, she said, is from the second grade. It's Eugene Preston, and Eugene is going to... Mother never got a chance to finish because Eugene began smashing walnuts on his forehead, one after another, just as fast as he could, and the walnut shells flew everywhere. People sitting in the back of the auditorium couldn't figure out what he was doing, and people sitting in the front of the auditorium knew what he was doing, but couldn't believe he was doing it. The principal, who was sitting in the back row, thought the kids were throwing things at Eugene, so he started up the aisle and ran smack into Mrs. Preston, who was yelling from someone to stop Eugene before he killed himself with walnuts. Nobody heard her. There was too much noise. Kids were jumping up and down and clapping and hollering, Go, Eugene! Go, Eugene! And then, Go, Hammerhead! Go, Hammerhead! Boomer Malone began counting walnuts. 22, 23, 24. And pretty soon everybody was chanting. 36, 37, 38. Boomer said Mrs. Preston fainted when Eugene got to 45 walnuts. But she didn't really faint. She just collapsed onto a seat, moaning something about scrambled brains. Eugene used all his walnuts, and then he set his bowl down on the stage and walked off. He looked taller to me, but that's probably because I was looking at him for a change. Eugene didn't win first prize, but neither did Alice. Her piano solo was called Flying Fingers, and it would have been pretty flashy, except there were so many walnut shells stuck in the piano keys that she kept having to stop and start over. Eugene was the popular favorite. But I guess the judges didn't want to reward a scramble your brains act, and in case that did eventually happen to him, so they gave the first prize to the kindergarten rhythm band, which was probably the best thing to do. It made all of the kindergarten mothers happy, and it didn't make anyone else very mad. Of course, kids were all over Eugene, telling him that he should have won, that he was the best, and wanting to feel his head. Did you always crack nuts that way? Someone asked, and Eugene said, No, that it was Gladys Herdman's idea. Why? Charlie said. What was in it for Gladys? If you didn't know any better, you might think that Gladys felt guilty because of Eugene's dog's haircut. But no one at the Woodrow Wilson School would think that, so when we went to get the delicious refreshments, No one was even surprised to find they were all gone. Mrs. McCluskey was in charge of the food, and when Mother asked her what happened, she said, "I just put the last plate of cupcakes on the table when Gladys Herdman ran in here yelling that Eugene Preston had gone crazy in the auditorium and was trying to kill himself." Now, normally I wouldn't pay any attention to anything a herdman told me, but I could hear a lot of noise and stamping around and people yelling, "Eugene! Eugene!" So naturally I went to see. She shrugged. "I still don't know what happened to Eugene, but I know what happened to the refreshments." Everybody knew what happened to the refreshments, but as usual, you couldn't prove anything because the evidence was gone and Gladys was gone. Mrs. Wendelkin didn't agree. She said the evidence was Eugene. It's obvious that Gladys Herdman got that poor little boy to knock himself silly and cause a big commotion. And then she went to the cafeteria and walked off with every last cookie. "Maybe so," said Eugene. "But Eugene didn't knock himself silly, and you couldn't feel very sorry for him because he was a big celebrity with his name in the newspaper. Unusual performance by plucky Eugene Preston earns a standing ovation at Woodrow Wilson Talent Show." The article also mentioned the kindergarten rhythm band, but not by name. "Too many of them," the reporter said, "and not by musical number. Could have been almost anything. Besides, Eugene wasn't even Eugene anymore, except to his mother and the teachers. And sometimes even the teachers forgot and called him Hammerhead, just like everyone else." So did the kids like his talent of cracking walnuts on his head? What do you think? It was funny, right? Well, it was funny. He was cracking walnuts on his head. Is that a talent? Right? He was sticking it in his mouth, right? But he didn't know until he got to the what? Eraser. Yeah.